Israel. Welcome, dear friends. Yesterday I was doing little meditation on my 7 points. Every morning I send a 7 point message which goes to some of my friends. And so as I was going through, what happened was, sometimes you get, that's the main product. Sometimes I get a byproduct also. And I got some thought from the Lord which I'm going to share. The title of this short meditation is about one among many. One among many. Well, in the book of Genesis chapter 6, it says that there was one among the whole world rather. Chapter 6, let me read that verse. It's a very interesting. Verse 5 says that chapter 6 and verse 5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great, human beings on the earth, entire earth, that every intent of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil continually. So the Lord was sorry. It brought a grief to the Lord. But verse 8, Genesis chapter 6 and verse 8, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So, entire earth, entire world, no one found favor except one person. Favor is contagious. Favor is infectious. What happened? Because of that one favored person, Noah, his family members were blessed. His wife was blessed. His sons were blessed. Even in-laws were blessed. Daughter-in-laws were blessed. That's what happened. But the entire world was washed up. One among many. Secondly, about Abraham. Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1 says, God called Abraham, or Abraham later, he became. And, God says that he wants to bless him and bless the whole world through him. He also found the favor of God, one among many. Chapter 11 and verse 31, in his entire place, only Abraham found the favor of God. Okay. Now, the third point I would like to bring out is Jeremiah chapter 5. It's very interesting. Please join with me to Jeremiah chapter 5. God is giving an assignment. Verse 1, Jeremiah 5. Roam to and fro. Do some exercise. Walk here and there. 2 days ago I went to swimming and, roam here and there, kind of. And here God gives some kind of assignment here. Look now and take notes. Seek into open squares if you can find one person. One person. One person who can who does justice and who seeks truth. Then if there is one person, in other words, one godly person, God says, I will pardon the entire city. Wow. Same thing God says through Ezekiel also, chapter 22, I sought for one person, I found him not. Same thing, Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Fourthly, Jesus gives a very interesting statement in Luke's Gospel, chapter 4 and verse 25. But I say to you in truth, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, the spiritual father, when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, 3.5 years, when a great famine came. What it says in verse 26, yet Elijah was sent to none of them. He did not go to any of the widows, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon. One widow among, the entire town. And here is land of Sidon, God sent. Verse 27, Luke chapter 4 and verse 27, there were many lepers. Listen to this. Many lepers in Israel. And in the time of Elisha, it was previously Elijah, the spiritual father. Now Elisha became a spiritual father. And none of them was cleansed except Naaman of Syria. You know what Jesus was telling? They became very, when they, verse 28 says, when they heard, everybody in the synagogue became very angry. It was not something to be angry at. Why did they get angry? Because Jesus said, there were many widows among believers, Israel, but God sent to Sidon, to unbelievers, the non-Jews, the Gentiles. And there were many lepers in Israel, entire country Israel, but God did not send to the believers, believing lepers. Lepers were believers, but Jesus says, in the time of Elisha, God healed only Naaman of Syria. Again, he was not a believer. So that's why they were angry. God was trying to say, if believers do not take responsibility, I will move, to somebody who is available. Something like that. Okay. One Noah among many, entire world. One Abraham among many. One godly person God is seeking, if I found. One person I am willing to forgive the entire nation. One widow among many. One leper among many. One virgin, sixthly, among many. Luke's Gospel, chapter 1 and verse 27, it says that there was one virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, and so the angel of God came and said, highly favored one, the Lord is with you. No, there were so many virgins, but God chose one highly favored. She found the favor of God. That's what we see in chapter 1 and verse 28 of Luke's Gospel. And again we see it in verse 30. Finally, one wholehearted person among the people during the church time. Acts chapter 8 and verse 1, we see the entire country was going through persecution, and God met, or Jesus met one person. That was Saul. Saul, why are you persecuting me? And then he asked, who are you, Lord? And Jesus, he said, and he became a chosen vessel. One among many. Would you like to be that one person among many? God bless you. Shalom.